The auctioneer struck the crystal baton against the black podium, and every conversation inside the enormous chamber vanished. A spotlight flooded the central platform. Inside a transparent containment field stood the last human. Heavy restraint bands circled his wrists and ankles, yet he remained perfectly upright. His broad shoulders stayed relaxed beneath the plain gray prisoner uniform issued by the auction house. Dark brown hair framed a face marked by old scars, while calm blue eyes wandered across the audience with quiet curiosity instead of fear. The crowd expected desperation. They found composure. "Honored patrons," the auctioneer said. "Lot 1. Biological designation. Human. Verified authentic. Male. Estimated age, 34 standard years. The final confirmed member of an extinct civilization." Excited murmurs rolled through the amphitheater. Collectors leaned forward. Military contractors activated recording devices. Historians whispered to one another. Entire fortunes had been spent chasing human artifacts. Now the artifact was breathing. High above the stage, Lady Sorel Valor watched from a private balcony. Silver-white hair flowed over one shoulder as she folded elegant hands across the railing. "I shouldn't have accepted this invitation," she said. The elderly steward beside her nodded. "You rarely enjoy imperial social gatherings, my lady. I dislike watching people sold." Her violet eyes drifted toward the man below. He lifted his head. For one impossible heartbeat, their eyes met across hundreds of meters. Instead of pleading, he offered the smallest nod. Not gratitude, not surrender, recognition. It unsettled her. The auctioneer continued. "Human physical capability exceeds most known species. Adaptability is legendary. Genetic sampling rights are included. Ownership transfer follows imperial property statutes." Boos erupted from several balconies. Others applauded. Sorel looked away. The man deserved neither reaction. A smooth voice echoed from the opposite side of the chamber. 5 million. Heads turned toward Lord Varix, one of the Empire's wealthiest nobles. He smiled without warmth. Another bidder answered immediately. 6 million. Numbers climbed like wildfire. 8, 10, 15. Sorel barely listened until Varix casually glanced toward her balcony. His smile widened. 30 million. The room fell silent. Everyone understood. No extinct creature justified that price. This was theater. The steward leaned closer. "My lady." "I know. They're baiting you." Lord Varix raised his glass toward her. "Surely House Valor cannot allow humanity's last survivor to become someone's laboratory specimen." Laughter spread through nearby balconies. Sorel recognized the trap. If she remained silent, rivals would accuse her family of lacking compassion. If she bid, they would bankrupt her reputation over sentimental weakness. She inhaled slowly. 31 million. Several nobles chuckled. Varix answered without hesitation. 32. She studied the man inside the containment field. He never once looked toward the bidders. He watched exits. Security placements. Ceiling supports. Camera angles. No frightened prisoner surveyed a room that way. Something about him refused to fit. 33. The duel continued. Each increase earned delighted applause. Finally, Varix leaned back. House Valor appears quite attached to extinct pets. More laughter. Sorel ignored him. 40 million. A stunned silence swept the chamber. The auctioneer grinned. 40 million once. Varix slowly lowered his bidding tablet. Twice. His smile returned. Sold. The baton struck. Applause thundered. Servants hurried toward Sorel's balcony carrying ownership documents. She signed without celebration. Below, technicians powered down the containment field. 2 guards approached the human with shock batons. Before either touched him, he stepped forward voluntarily. One guard hesitated. The other scoffed. Still thinks he has dignity. The human spoke for the first time. "I never misplaced it." His voice carried effortlessly through the chamber. Deep, calm, controlled. The guard shoved him toward the exit. He walked without resistance. Sorel descended from her balcony to complete the transfer. Imperial law required buyer and property to stand together before witnesses. The human stopped a respectful distance away. "I am Lady Sorel Valor." He inclined his head. "Elias Rowan, you speak Imperial fluently. I speak several languages. You understand your legal status? I understand your laws." The answer was polite. It was not acceptance. Before Sorel could respond, Every light inside the corridor flickered. Once, twice. Then darkness swallowed the hall. Screams echoed beyond the walls. Emergency lights flashed crimson. The steward whispered, "Assassins." Explosive charges ripped apart the entrance. Armored figures stormed through drifting smoke carrying suppressed plasma rifles. Their leader shouted, "Kill the noble! Recover the human!" Security guards fired first. Blue energy bolts crossed the corridor. 3 defenders collapsed instantly. Cyril froze. Training had prepared her for diplomacy, not murder. A rifle swung toward her. She never heard the shot. A powerful hand caught her shoulder. Elias pulled her sideways as burning plasma tore through the space where she had stood. His restraint bands snapped apart against a steel support column. Not broken, unlocked. He had somehow released them. One assassin rushed forward with an electrified blade. Elias seized the attacker's wrist. A sharp twist cracked armored joints. The weapon changed hands. One clean movement. The blade buried itself beneath another attacker's helmet. No wasted motion. No hesitation. The remaining assassins opened fire together. Elias shoved an overturned cargo trolley across the corridor. Energy bolts hammered into reinforced metal. He grabbed a loose maintenance cable hanging from the damaged ceiling. One violent pull. The lighting framework crashed onto advancing shooters. Sparks erupted. Smoke filled the passage. The steward stared in disbelief. He planned this. "No," Elias said. "I adapted." Another attacker charged from behind. Without looking, Elias drove an elbow backward into the man's throat before spinning and disarming him. The stolen rifle barked 3 precise bursts. 3 armored bodies collapsed. Silence returned almost as suddenly as the violence had begun. Only crackling wires disturbed the stillness. Cyril's breathing refused to slow. Elias gently handed the rifle to the surviving security officer. "I believe this belongs to your department." The officer accepted it automatically. You saved her." "I did." "You could have escaped." Elias glanced toward the shattered exterior doors leading into open spaceport traffic. Then he looked back at Cyril. "I don't abandon civilians." Somewhere beyond the corridor, emergency alarms finally began to howl. Footsteps thundered closer. Imperial reinforcements. Medical teams. Investigators. The auction station had become a battlefield in less than a minute. Cyril studied the man everyone believed she had purchased. His breathing remained steady. His expression never changed. There was no triumph. No panic. Only quiet assessment as he searched every shadow for another threat. At that moment, she understood one simple, terrifying truth. The galaxy had not sold her its last human. It had delivered something far more dangerous. The journey from Velastra Exchange to House Valor's flagship passed in complete silence. The luxury cruiser drifted away from the station under heavy military escort, its polished silver hull reflecting the swirling blues of the nearby nebula. Inside, security officers patrolled every corridor with drawn pulse carbines, while engineers inspected the vessel for hidden explosives. No one spoke to Elias unless duty required it. He seemed perfectly content with that. 2 guards escorted him through the private residential wing before stopping outside an elegant suite overlooking the stars. The room was spacious, furnished with handcrafted wood imported from a distant forest world, soft lighting, and shelves filled with books rather than decorative trophies. One guard activated the door. "This will be your quarters." Elias stepped inside, taking in every detail with a single slow glance. One entrance, one emergency hatch, ventilation shaft above the wardrobe. 2 concealed cameras. He nodded once. "They're comfortable." The younger guard frowned. "You expected something worse?" "I've learned expectations are expensive." The guard couldn't tell if it was a joke. Before he could answer, Lady Cyril entered the corridor. "You may leave us." Both guards exchanged uncertain looks. "My lady, that wasn't a request." They saluted and disappeared around the corner. The door remained open. Neither of them crossed the threshold. Cyril folded her hands behind her back. "I wanted to thank you." "You already did. I paid 40 million credits." A faint smile tugged at one corner of his mouth. "I was referring to the room." She almost laughed. Almost. Instead, she leaned against the doorway. "You could have escaped. So everyone keeps telling me." "Why didn't you?" Elias looked beyond her through the panoramic window. Thousands of stars stretched into eternity. "I made a decision. To remain someone's property? His eyes returned to hers. No. Then what decision? To protect the person standing closest to the danger. She searched his face for sarcasm. There was none. You don't even know me. I knew enough. You knew my name. I knew your reaction. My reaction? You were the only person in that auction who looked uncomfortable watching living beings sold. Sorel blinked. You noticed that? I noticed most things. Silence settled between them. Not awkward. Simply thoughtful. She finally stepped into the room. Imperial law says you're mine. I've read your legal code. I dislike it. I noticed. Her fingers traced the edge of a bookshelf. I won't force you to call me mistress. I wasn't planning to. Another tiny smile escaped her before she could stop it. What were you planning? Lady Sorel seems appropriate. You aren't afraid of offending me. If I intended offense, you'd know. For the first time that day, she laughed openly. It was brief. Warm, unexpected. You have remarkable confidence. I have experience. The words carried more weight than their simplicity suggested. She studied the scars along his forearms. None looked recent. Each seemed earned. You were military. He didn't answer. You move like someone trained. Still silence. I won't press. Thank you. She nodded toward the shelves. Feel free to read anything here. I appreciate that. The kitchen can prepare whatever you prefer. I'll eat what's available. You aren't making this difficult. I try not to. A chime echoed through the room. Sorel touched the communicator on her wrist. The face of her security commander appeared above the display. My lady, we've completed preliminary analysis. And? The attackers weren't pirates. I assumed as much. They carried military-grade equipment with serial numbers professionally removed. His expression darkened. They specifically ignored everyone except you and the human. Sorel glanced toward Elias. He hadn't reacted, almost as though he'd expected the report. We'll speak in the briefing room. The transmission ended. She turned back. I'll have someone bring dinner. You don't need to. I insist. After she left, the automatic door slid closed. Elias waited. 5 seconds. 10. 30. Then he approached the bookshelf. His fingertips drifted across old leather bindings before selecting a history volume. He opened it halfway. A tiny listening device rested inside the hollowed pages. Without expression, he removed the transmitter. He set it gently on the desk. Then he looked toward the ceiling. There are 4 more. A hidden camera rotated almost imperceptibly. He offered it a polite nod. I'm aware you're there. 3 decks below, stunned technicians stared at surveillance monitors. He found them. The security commander frowned. How? He never searched. He walked in. He looked once, and then he knew. The commander rubbed his temples. Remove every listening device. What? You heard me. My lord, Lady Sorel ordered discreet observation. I know what she ordered. He watched Elias continue reading without another glance toward the cameras. But if he can find every bug in 30 seconds, he sighed. Then discreet observation has already failed. That evening, dinner arrived precisely on schedule. Instead of servants, Sorel carried the tray herself. When the door opened, she found Elias standing beside the window, watching stars drift past. You brought it personally. I wanted another conversation. He accepted the tray. Thank you. She noticed he waited until she sat before taking the first bite. That's unusual. What is? Most people would have started eating immediately. My mother considered good manners worth preserving. The simple statement caught her off guard. You remember your parents? I remember everything. Something in his voice discouraged further questions. Instead, she reached for the tea. You've been surprisingly honest. I haven't lied. You also haven't answered several questions. Those are different things. She tilted her head. I suppose they are. Dinner passed comfortably. They discussed architecture, languages, music, books. To her astonishment, Elias spoke passionately about classical literature, orbital engineering, and agricultural ecosystems with equal enthusiasm. He never tried to impress. He simply knew. At one point she asked, "What do humans value most?" He considered the question carefully. It depends on the human. And you? Keeping promises. His answer came immediately. No hesitation, no performance. She found herself watching him more than eating. He noticed. "You have another question." "I do. You don't have to ask. I'd rather hear your answer." She set down her cup. "Earlier when you fought." "Yes." "You looked." She searched for the right word. "Peaceful." Elias lowered his gaze. "I wasn't." "You hit it well." "I practiced." "You've seen a great deal of violence." "Enough." His expression finally shifted. Just slightly. Not fear. Fatigue. Ancient fatigue. Before she could speak again, every light inside the room dimmed. Emergency power engaged. The ship's intercom crackled. Alert. Unknown vessel detected inside defensive perimeter. The security commander's voice followed immediately. "Lady Sorrel, remain where you are." Elias was already on his feet. "How many escorts do we have?" She looked up. 4 cruisers." "They won't be enough. You don't know who's out there." "No." He walked toward the window. "But if someone breached an Imperial escort formation." His eyes narrowed at distant flashes beyond the glass. "They're not here for diplomacy." Outside, streaks of blue weapons fire ignited the darkness between the stars as the first escort exploded into a cloud of burning metal. The explosion illuminated the observation window for only a heartbeat. Fragments of the escort cruiser scattered across the darkness like burning embers before the flagship's defensive shields shimmered to life. Red warning lights washed through the corridor as the ship lurched beneath the impact of another distant barrage. The intercom crackled. "All personnel to emergency stations. This is not a drill." Sorrel steadied herself against the dining table. "That was one of our heavy cruisers." Elias never took his eyes off the battle. They disabled it before the crew had time to respond. "You can tell that from here?" The debris pattern. He watched another burst of weapons fire. No secondary reactor bloom. They boarded first. She stared at him. "You identified that in 2 seconds. I've seen similar tactics." The ship shuddered again. A louder impact echoed somewhere below. The door slid open without warning as the security commander entered with 6 armed soldiers. "My lady," his gaze immediately shifted toward Elias. "We're relocating you to the armored command deck." Elias asked. "How many hostile vessels?" 5 confirmed. "Classes?" The commander frowned. "How would that—" "Commander," Sorrel interrupted gently. "Answer him." The officer hesitated. 3 destroyers, 2 unidentified contacts. Elias nodded once. "The unidentified ships are command vessels. You don't know that. They've stayed outside weapon range." He looked toward the stars again. "They're coordinating the attack." The commander folded his arms. "Convenient theory." Elias didn't argue. Instead, he walked to the room's display console. "May I?" Sorrel gestured toward it. He activated the tactical display. Dozens of blue and red icons appeared above the table. Without requesting permission, he rearranged several fleet markers. The commander stepped forward. "Stop." Elias ignored him. "Your escorts formed a defensive sphere." "Naturally. That's why they're dying." The commander scoffed. "Our formations have protected Imperial nobles for centuries. They're protecting the flagship." "Exactly. They should be protecting each other." Silence. Elias moved 3 icons into overlapping attack corridors. When isolated ships defend a single target, attackers dictate every engagement. His finger traced a new pattern. If they collapse inward instead, blue icons shifted. Crossfire forces enemy destroyers to expose their weaker engines whenever they advance. The commander stared. "That's—" One lieutenant leaned closer. "It increases overlapping firing solutions." Another officer whispered, "and cuts their blind zones in half." The commander slowly looked at Elias. "Where did you learn fleet tactics?" "I read." Nobody believed him. Sorrel quietly said, "Commander." He straightened. "I'll transmit the recommendations." "You trust him?" "I trust results." Outside, the flagship's escorts altered formation. The attacking destroyers adjusted a second too late. 3 Imperial cruisers opened intersecting volleys simultaneously. The lead pirate vessel lost its forward shields almost instantly. A concentrated beam punched through its engines. Fire erupted across its stern. One hostile ship drifted helplessly into another. The second exploded. Bridge officers throughout the fleet shouted in disbelief. "Enemy destroyer disabled." How? Who ordered the formation change? The flagship's communications officer answered. Lady Vaylor's guest. The security commander slowly lowered his datapad. I'll be damned. Elias merely stepped away from the console. It bought us time. That maneuver is classified. It was obvious. No. The commander shook his head. It wasn't. Respect had not replaced suspicion, but it had appeared beside it. The flagship reached jump distance. Moments later, blue light engulfed the ship as faster-than-light engines activated. The stars stretched into glowing lines. Then everything became still. Silence returned. Only the steady hum of the engines remained. The immediate danger had passed. For now. Hours later, House Vaylor's estate floated peacefully above the ocean world of Elysion. The enormous orbital residence resembled a palace suspended among the clouds, its white towers catching the warm light of the planet below. Security had tripled. Defense drones patrolled every approach. Medical teams examined every survivor from the convoy. Elias wandered alone through one of the estate's indoor gardens. Living trees arched over quiet stone paths. Water flowed gently beneath elegant bridges. For the first time since the auction, everything felt still. Footsteps approached behind him. Sorel. She carried 2 cups of steaming tea. I thought you might appreciate something warm. I do. She handed him one. Their fingers brushed. Just briefly. Neither pulled away immediately. You saved hundreds of lives today. I delayed a battle. You always diminish your accomplishments? I describe them. She smiled faintly. You know, she leaned against the garden railing. I've spent years surrounded by politicians. I'm sorry. She laughed softly. They always need recognition. They usually do. You don't. No. Why? Elias watched the water ripple beneath them. My work was never supposed to be remembered. She looked at him carefully. You've said things like that before. I know. They sound... She searched for the word. Lonely. He remained quiet. The silence itself became an answer. She stepped closer. Close enough to notice faint lines around his eyes that somehow made him appear older than 34 despite his youthful face. Not physically. Emotionally. You carry something. I do. You don't have to carry it alone. For several long seconds, neither moved. The garden seemed impossibly quiet. Then Elias spoke almost too softly to hear. I've buried everyone I ever knew. Her breath caught. She hadn't expected honesty. Not like that. I'm sorry. So am I. There was no self-pity. Only acceptance. She reached toward him before stopping herself halfway. He noticed. Instead of stepping back, he gently closed the remaining distance. Her fingertips rested lightly against the scar along his forearm. Does this one hurt? Not anymore. There are many. There are. You don't hide them. They're part of me. She traced another faded mark near his wrist. His pulse remained steady. Yet she noticed his breathing deepen ever so slightly beneath the contact. The realization sent unexpected warmth through her chest. He wasn't unaffected. He was simply disciplined. A distant alarm interrupted the moment. Both turned instinctively. A servant hurried across the garden. My lady. What is it? The engineering staff requests your presence immediately. They've discovered something. Deep beneath the estate, engineers surrounded an ancient storage chamber that had remained sealed for nearly a century. At its center stood an inactive machine unlike anything currently manufactured. Its surface was smooth matte black. No visible seams, no recognizable power source. The chief engineer bowed. We found this while expanding the security vault. It shouldn't exist. Sorel studied the strange object. No identification? None. She looked toward Elias. The moment his eyes settled on the machine, something changed. For the first time since the auction, genuine surprise crossed his face. Very faint, but unmistakable. He walked slowly toward it. One hand rose almost unconsciously. The engineer protested. Please don't touch. His fingertips rested against the dark surface. A deep tone echoed through the chamber. Blue lines spread across the machine like flowing rivers of light. The room fell silent. Then a calm, synthetic voice spoke in flawless Imperial. Human Sentinel recognized. Commander Elias Rowan. Identity confirmed. Every engineer froze. Sorrel stared at him in disbelief. The machine continued. Awaiting ARC protocol authorization. Elias slowly closed his eyes. After 300 years, one of humanity's hidden guardians had finally found him. No one in the underground chamber breathed. The ancient machine's blue illumination reflected across stunned faces as its voice echoed through the vault one final time. Awaiting ARC protocol authorization. Silence followed. Not even the engineers seemed willing to move. Sorrel looked from the machine to Elias. His expression had changed. For the first time since she'd met him, the calm certainty that seemed woven into every movement had cracked. It wasn't panic. It was recognition. The kind that came from seeing something believed forever lost. The security commander was the first to recover. His sidearm cleared its holster. Step away from the device. Elias didn't move. Commander, Sorrel said quietly, lower your weapon. My lady, that machine identified him as... I heard it. It knows his name. I heard that too. The commander kept his weapon raised. Elias. The human slowly turned toward him. I understand. You understand? You've just learned the man purchased at a slave auction may not be what he appears. The commander's jaw tightened. That's one way to describe it. Elias looked back at the machine. I need a few minutes. No. The commander took one cautious step forward. You'll explain first. Before the situation could deteriorate further, the machine spoke again. Security warning. Non-human personnel detected within restricted authorization radius. A pulse of pale blue light spread across the chamber. Weapons throughout the room abruptly powered down. The commander's pistol emitted a sharp tone before its energy core disengaged completely. Engineers checked diagnostic displays in confusion. My scanner just shut off. So did mine. Nothing's responding. Only Elias remained unsurprised. It isn't attacking you. The commander glared. How reassuring. It simply removed immediate threats. You call disarming everyone reassuring? It could have done considerably more. That answer earned another long silence. Sorrel stepped forward. Elias. He met her eyes. I've trusted you every step since the auction. I know. I need you to trust me now. His shoulders lowered almost imperceptibly. You deserve answers. Then give them. He glanced toward the waiting machine. Not all of them. The ones you can. Elias nodded once. My name is Elias Rowan. I gathered that. I served humanity. As a soldier. Among other things. The machine called you Sentinel. It did. What is that? He considered his words carefully. A responsibility. Military? Yes. Government? Yes. Still active? He hesitated. Apparently. The commander's eyes narrowed. Apparently. I believed every remaining Sentinel had failed their assignments centuries ago. The engineers exchanged confused glances. One whispered, Centuries? Sorrel heard it too. So you misspoke earlier. When? You said you remembered your parents. I do. You said you'd buried everyone you knew. I did. Elias. Her voice softened. How old are you? He looked at her for several seconds before answering. 312. No one laughed. The absolute certainty in his voice made the number somehow believable. The commander lowered his useless sidearm. Cryogenic suspension. Elias nodded. Mostly. The room felt smaller. Sorrel searched his face again. The lines she'd noticed earlier. The weariness. The loneliness. They suddenly made sense. You really have been alone. For a long time. She stepped closer. Close enough that only he heard her next words. And you carried that without telling anyone. I couldn't. Why? Because if anyone learned who I was, his gaze drifted toward the silent machine. People would start dying. The machine interrupted. Commander Rowan. ARC custodian awaiting authentication. Elias inhaled slowly. Open primary interface. Blue light gathered above the machine, forming a floating sphere covered in unfamiliar symbols. Every engineer leaned forward. One nearly dropped his datapad. I've never seen operating architecture like this. You haven't, Elias replied. It predates every modern system. He placed his palm against the glowing sphere. The symbols shifted instantly. DNA confirmed. Neural signature confirmed. Sentinel authorization accepted. The sphere dissolved into thousands of tiny lights. Then an image appeared. Not a map, a starfield. Hundreds of stars glowed gold. Millions more remained dark. Cyril frowned. What am I looking at? Elias answered quietly. Home. Far beyond House Valor's estate. Inside the Imperial Intelligence Directorate, a senior analyst froze before his console. An automated alert had just appeared. Unauthorized activation detected. Classification: unknown human technology. His fingers raced across the controls. Signal origin: House Valor. Energy signature: impossible. He immediately opened a secure channel. Director. An older woman's face appeared. What is it? We've detected an ancient transmission. Origin? House Valor. She sat upright. Source? The analyst swallowed. We don't know. But the signal uses encryption that doesn't exist in any Imperial archive. She stared silently at the report. Track everything. Already attempting. And the human? He was present when the signal began. The director closed the transmission, then opened another. Priority black. Only 3 people in the Empire possessed clearance to receive it. One accepted almost instantly. A familiar face filled the screen. Lord Varex, the noble who had deliberately driven the auction price higher. The director spoke first. You were right. I usually am. The human triggered something. Varex smiled. I never doubted he would. You knew? I suspected. Who is he? Varex's smile disappeared. I don't know. But I intend to. Back at House Valor, the floating star map slowly rotated above the ancient machine. Gold lights blinked one after another. Thousands. Millions. Cyril noticed patterns forming. They're connected. Yes. Trade routes? No. Colonies? Elias remained quiet. The machine answered instead. Human Continuity Network. Every engineer stared. One whispered, continuity. Another looked toward Elias. There are more humans. Silence. The question hung in the air. Elias finally spoke. I don't know. The commander frowned. You don't know? I wasn't supposed to. What does that mean? He looked at the stars. My mission ended the day humanity disappeared. But humanity disappeared, so everyone believed. Cyril slowly turned toward him. You mean? His voice remained almost painfully calm. I never received confirmation that we were gone. The room became impossibly still. The machine's gentle light reflected in his blue eyes. For centuries, the galaxy had mourned an extinct civilization. For centuries, Elias had believed he was the last man alive. Now, standing beneath an ancient map of hidden stars, he faced a possibility he had buried long ago. Perhaps humanity had never vanished at all. And somewhere beyond the darkness, someone might still be waiting for the Sentinel to come home. The chamber remained silent long after the star map stabilized. Millions of tiny golden points drifted through the air, connected by faint streams of light that resembled flowing rivers between distant suns. Every route seemed deliberate. Every destination hidden. Cyril finally broke the silence. You truly didn't know. Elias slowly shook his head. I was never meant to. She stepped beside him, studying the map instead of his face. Then who was? The people who designed the protocol. The leaders of humanity? He looked at one particular cluster of stars. The ones willing to disappear. The ancient machine spoke again. Arc Custodian prepared to deliver historical briefing. Sentinel authorization required. Elias hesitated. The security commander noticed. You don't trust it? I trust it completely. Then what's wrong? If I authorize the briefing, he looked around the room. Nothing will ever be the same again. Cyril met his gaze. It already isn't. For several seconds, neither of them spoke. Then Elias placed his palm against the interface. I authorize. The chamber darkened. The floating stars dissolved into an enormous projection that filled the entire vault. A blue world appeared. Oceans, clouds, green continents. Earth. The image slowly rotated in complete silence. Several engineers stared in awe. So that's the birthplace of humanity, Sorel whispered. The machine continued. 318 standard years ago, the image changed. Hundreds of human warships drifted above Earth, not in battle formation, in evacuation formation. Countless civilian transports departed the planet. Children waved through observation windows. Families embraced. Cities remained untouched. There were no explosions, no burning continents, no invasion, only departure. The projection shifted again. Beyond the edge of known space, another fleet emerged. Gigantic black vessels unlike anything the Empire had ever built. They eclipsed entire moons. The machine's voice remained calm. Long-range exploration identified an extragalactic civilization consuming advanced stellar societies. Another image appeared. Dead planets, empty systems, silent ruins. Species erased so completely that only shattered architecture remained. Strategic assessment predicted eventual discovery of inhabited galactic regions. Sorel felt her chest tighten. So humanity ran. Elias quietly answered, "No." The machine continued. Human High Command concluded concentrated civilization would attract hostile attention toward developing species. Golden lines spread across the projection. Thousands of hidden colonies, secret shipyards, concealed habitats buried inside nebulae, rogue planets, and artificial worlds. Operation Ark initiated. Human civilization dispersed into concealed sanctuary networks. Public extinction narrative successfully established. The projection faded. Silence returned. One engineer whispered, "They chose to disappear." Another slowly sat down. They sacrificed their own history. The security commander looked toward Elias. So the galaxy spent 3 centuries believing humanity had died, because humanity wanted us to. Elias nodded. Yes. Sorel couldn't take her eyes off him. You carried that alone. I carried what I knew. And what you didn't. His expression softened. I learned to live with both. Hours later, most of the engineers had left the chamber under strict orders of secrecy. Only Sorel and Elias remained. They stood on an open balcony overlooking Elysion's endless oceans. Sunlight reflected across gentle waves thousands of meters below. Neither hurried to speak. Finally, Sorel asked, "Did you ever stop hoping?" He rested both hands against the railing. "No. But I stopped expecting." She understood the difference immediately. Hope survived. Expectation eventually became too painful. A cool breeze lifted strands of her silver-white hair. "You must have imagined this moment." "I did. And it never looked like this." She smiled faintly. "What did it look like?" "I imagined waking beside familiar faces." Instead, he looked toward her. "I didn't imagine meeting someone who belonged to another civilization." "You make it sound disappointing." "It isn't." Their eyes met. The silence between them felt different now. Warmer. Closer. Sorel took one careful step forward. "I bought you because I couldn't bear seeing you treated like an object." "I know. I never imagined," her voice faltered, "that I'd be standing beside someone who sacrificed everything for strangers." Elias looked away. "It wasn't just me." "No." She reached for his hand. "This time it is." Their fingers intertwined naturally. No hesitation. No uncertainty. His calloused hand was warm despite the cool breeze. "You've been alone for centuries." "Mostly? You don't have to be anymore." Emotion flickered across his face before disappearing beneath years of discipline. "I don't know how." "You don't have to." She gently squeezed his hand. "We'll learn." For the first time since awakening from cryosleep centuries earlier, Elias allowed himself to simply stand beside another person without calculating exits, contingencies, or survival probabilities. The moment lasted only seconds. It felt immeasurably longer. He lifted his free hand and gently brushed a loose strand of silver hair away from her face. His touch was careful, almost hesitant, as though afraid the moment might disappear. Sorel closed her eyes briefly beneath the gesture. When she opened them again, their faces were only inches apart. I've wanted to do that since the auction, he smiled. So have I, she laughed softly. You? I noticed your hair before I noticed your title. That's unexpectedly flattering. I wasn't trying to flatter you. I know. That made it better. Slowly, giving her every chance to step away, Elias leaned closer. She met him halfway. Their first kiss was gentle, unhurried, not born from urgency or possession. It was quiet reassurance, a promise that neither of them would face what came next alone. When they finally separated, Sorrel rested her forehead lightly against his. You realize this complicates everything. It already was. She smiled. I suppose it was. The peaceful moment shattered as alarms screamed throughout the estate. Every defense battery activated simultaneously. Red warning lights flooded the balcony. The security commander appeared in the doorway, breathing hard. My lady, what happened? He looked directly at Elias. We intercepted an encrypted Imperial transmission. From whom? Lord Varix. The commander's expression hardened. He isn't assembling a recovery team. He paused. He's assembling an invasion fleet. Far above Elysion, dozens of hyperspace ruptures bloomed across the darkness as warships began emerging one after another. They weren't arriving to negotiate. They had come for the Sentinel. The first warship emerged from hyperspace like a blade cutting through velvet. Then another. And another. Within seconds, dozens of vessels filled the darkness above Elysion. Sleek Imperial cruisers held formation around two enormous command carriers bearing the personal insignia of Lord Varix. The orbital defense network immediately locked onto the newcomers. No one fired. Not yet. Inside House Vaylor's command center, holographic displays painted the room in shifting shades of blue and crimson. Officers hurried between consoles, while fleet coordinators relayed reports from every sector of the estate. The security commander looked toward Cyril. My lady, their fleet outnumbers every defense ship we possess. Estimated strength? 48 combat vessels. The number settled heavily over the room. One officer swallowed. We have 11. Cyril stood at the center of the command platform with remarkable composure, despite the tension pressing against every heartbeat. Has Lord Varix requested communication? He already has. Put him through. The holographic image of Varix materialized above the central table. He wore immaculate ceremonial attire, his silver cloak draped over one shoulder, as though he were attending a formal banquet instead of leading an invasion. Lady Cyril. His smile was courteous. I regret arriving without proper notice. You brought nearly 50 warships. I brought certainty. You brought intimidation. Only if necessary. His eyes drifted toward Elias. There he is. Elias met the noble's gaze without speaking. Varix's smile widened. I've searched for you for many years. I gathered that. You hid remarkably well. I wasn't hiding. No? I simply wasn't looking for you. Several officers struggled to hide their reactions. Varix ignored them. Commander Elias Rowan. So you know my name. I know considerably more than your name. Elias remained silent. Varix folded his hands behind his back. I also know the machine beneath this estate activated. The command center became noticeably quieter. Whatever you discovered belongs to the Empire. Elias answered calmly. It never did. It exists inside Imperial territory. It existed long before your empire. Varix's pleasant expression hardened slightly. I'll offer one final opportunity. He looked directly at Cyril. Surrender the human, stand down, and no blood need be spilled. Cyril didn't hesitate. No. Varix sighed almost theatrically. I feared you'd answer that way. The transmission ended. Seconds later, warning alarms screamed. Enemy weapons charging. The first volley never reached the estate. A brilliant wall of blue energy erupted from hidden defense satellites orbiting Elysion, intercepting the incoming barrage high above the atmosphere. Explosions blossomed across space like artificial stars. The security commander stared at his tactical display. Those satellites have been decommissioned for 80 years. The chief engineer looked equally confused. They activated by themselves. Every eye slowly turned toward Elias. He shook his head. I didn't activate them. The ancient machine's synthetic voice echoed softly from a nearby communications console. Emergency Sentinel protection protocols engaged. Legacy defense assets responding. One officer whispered, "Legacy?" Across the tactical display, dozens of previously invisible structures appeared around the planet. Hidden orbital platforms, concealed drone hangars, weapon stations buried inside harmless-looking satellites. The commander blinked. "How many defenses are there?" The machine answered. "Current operational status, 32%. Only 32? No one liked the implication. If less than a third of the system remained functional after 3 centuries, how powerful had it once been? The battle intensified. Imperial cruisers broke formation, attempting to overwhelm the newly awakened defenses through sheer numbers. Streams of plasma crossed the darkness. Missiles chased interceptors. Fragments of burning hulls drifted between expanding clouds of debris. The security commander studied the tactical display. "They're splitting into 3 attack groups." Elias stepped beside him. "They're trying to overload separate defense sectors. Can we stop them?" "Not by reacting." The commander glanced sideways. "What would you do?" Instead of answering immediately, Elias studied the battlefield. His eyes moved from one formation to another with quiet concentration. Finally, he pointed toward a cluster of hostile destroyers. "They're expecting us to defend the planet. Naturally, we won't." Several officers looked at him in confusion. "They've already committed to the attack." He highlighted a narrow corridor between 2 asteroid fragments. "Strike here." The commander frowned. "That's empty space. It won't be in 40 seconds. No one understood. Still, the commander remembered the escort battle. He gave the order. "Redirect Squadron 3. 40 seconds later, exactly as Elias predicted, Varrix's reserve fleet accelerated through the corridor. They emerged directly into the waiting crossfire of hidden defense drones and House Valor's fastest cruisers. The lead carrier lost its shields instantly. Its escorts scattered in confusion. Within moments, 3 destroyers drifted powerless through space. Bridge crews across both fleets erupted in astonishment. How did they know? Our approach vector was classified. Who predicted that interception? Aboard his flagship, Lord Varrix slowly stood from his command throne. His calm composure finally cracked. Interesting. His fleet commander looked nervous. "My lord?" The stories were true. "What stories?" Varrix continued watching the battle unfold. "They never win by having larger fleets. They win by convincing larger fleets to defeat themselves." Back inside the estate, the security commander stared openly at Elias. "You anticipated his reserve maneuver. I anticipated his personality. You've never met him. I didn't need to." The commander almost smiled. "I've spent 30 years studying military strategy. So have I. You've had considerably longer." For the first time, the commander extended his hand. "My apologies." Elias accepted it. "For what?" "For treating you like a suspect. You had good reasons." "I still do." The commander gave a small laugh. "But I'd rather have you standing beside me than against me." "So would I." An urgent alarm interrupted the brief moment. The chief communications officer looked up sharply. Multiple unauthorized boarding signatures. The room stiffened. Location? Sublevel vault. Sorel's expression changed immediately. The Ark custodian. They bypassed every external defense. Elias was already moving. They came for the machine. The security commander grabbed his rifle. "I'll bring a squad." "No." Elias reached for a nearby equipment locker. Inside rested an old emergency combat vest. Not military. Not advanced. Simple protective gear. He slipped it over his shirt with practiced efficiency. Too many people in narrow corridors become obstacles. "I'm not sending you alone." "You aren't." Elias looked toward Sorel. She was already fastening the sidearm at her waist. The commander opened his mouth. "My lady? Absolutely not." She met his eyes with calm determination. "They came into my home." She checked the weapon's power cell. "They'll find I'm a very poor host." Elias looked at her for a long moment. "You understand this may become dangerous." She smiled gently. "I noticed." He offered his hand. Without hesitation, she took it. Together they ran toward the underground vault as warning sirens echoed through the estate. Far below them, blast doors were already beginning to buckle under explosive charges. Someone had breached the estate from within, and whoever had done it already knew exactly where humanity's greatest secret was hidden. The first blast door folded inward with a deafening metallic groan. Smoke surged into the corridor, as armored figures advanced through the opening, their armor bearing no Imperial insignia. Matte black plating concealed every identifying mark, and their movements were too disciplined for ordinary mercenaries. The lead operative raised one hand. Custodian chamber is 30 meters ahead. No unnecessary casualties. The Sentinel is priority. The order stopped Elias in his tracks. He and Cyril had just rounded the opposite corner. They know exactly where they're going, Cyril whispered. They've studied the estate. Elias crouched beside the corridor wall, studying the attackers instead of immediately engaging. 8 operatives, 2 heavy weapons, a combat engineer carrying breaching charges, a communications specialist hanging back. Professionals. The security commander and 4 guards caught up moments later. We've sealed the next security door. Elias shook his head. It won't hold. Then we fight here. No. The commander frowned. They expect resistance. Of course they do. So? We'll give them something else. Elias pointed toward an overhead maintenance conduit. Commander. Yes? Can your people reroute emergency power? To where? Every corridor except this one. The commander blinked. You want to shut off our own lights? I want them confident. Understanding slowly dawned. They'll believe we abandoned the route. Exactly. The commander didn't question him. Do it. Within seconds, the emergency lighting vanished. Darkness swallowed the adjoining passages. Only the attackers' helmet lamps pierced the gloom. Their leader smiled beneath his visor. They're retreating. Advance. The entire unit accelerated, exactly as Elias intended. The moment the last operative crossed the junction, Elias struck. He reached through an open maintenance panel and pulled a manual fire suppression lever. Thousands of liters of compressed foam erupted from hidden ceiling vents. The attackers disappeared beneath a blinding white torrent. Helmet optics instantly became useless. Vision lost! Switch to thermal! Another operative shouted. Thermals are blocked! The expanding foam coated every sensor. Weapons. Visors. Communications arrays. Elias moved before the confusion settled. One operative stumbled blindly into him. A quick strike to the wrist sent the rifle clattering across the floor. A second blow dropped the attacker unconscious. No wasted movement, no anger, just precision. The security commander and his guards surged forward. For the first time, they weren't reacting. They were exploiting chaos someone else had created. Within less than a minute, 6 infiltrators lay restrained. The remaining 2 retreated deeper into the corridor. They're falling back. No, Elias said. They're buying time. As if on cue, the entire estate trembled. A deep vibration rolled through the foundation. The commander looked toward the vault. They planted another charge. They reached the custodian chamber seconds later. The reinforced entrance remained intact. The wall beside it did not. A jagged opening revealed the ancient machine beyond. One surviving infiltrator knelt before the Arc Custodian, a compact device attached to its surface. The operative looked over one shoulder. I only needed 5 seconds. He pressed the activation switch. The device emitted a sharp pulse. Every light inside the chamber went dark. Even the Arc Custodian fell silent. Cyril's heart sank. No, the infiltrator laughed. History dies today. Elias didn't answer. Instead, he calmly walked toward the silent machine. The infiltrator leveled his weapon. Stop. Elias kept walking. I said stop. The rifle fired. Cyril's breath caught. The energy bolt struck Elias squarely in the chest. He staggered 1 step backward. The combat vest beneath his shirt blackened where the shot landed. Then he straightened. The infiltrator froze. Impossible. Elias looked down briefly. Ceramic composite. He brushed away the scorched fabric. It hurts. He met the stunned operative's eyes. But not enough. The infiltrator tried firing again. Nothing happened. He stared at his weapon in disbelief. The security commander smiled grimly. We cut power to the corridor. No charging stations. No fresh energy cells. The infiltrator whispered. We've been manipulated. Elias reached him before he could react. 1 clean disarm. 1 controlled strike. Silence. Cyril hurried to Elias. You've been shot. I've been inconvenienced. She looked at the scorched vest. That's your definition of inconvenience? It wasn't my favorite experience. Despite everything, she laughed. The sound echoed through the battered chamber. You choose remarkable moments for humor. I found they matter most then. She gently rested one hand against his chest where the bolt had struck. Does it really only hurt? It'll bruise. Her relief showed plainly across her face. Without thinking, she wrapped both arms around him. He hesitated only an instant before returning the embrace. Around them, soldiers quietly looked elsewhere. The commander cleared his throat. I'll inspect the perimeter. No one objected. The peaceful moment ended when the Ark custodian suddenly emitted a low hum. Blue light returned, far brighter than before. The damaged wall seemed to disappear beneath expanding holographic projections. Ancient symbols filled the chamber. The synthetic voice returned. Emergency override acknowledged. Sentinel survival confirmed. Ark protocol proceeding. Elias stepped back. I didn't authorize anything. Authorization no longer required. Every display inside the chamber came alive simultaneously. Hundreds, then thousands, then millions. Golden lights spread across the star map faster than anyone could follow. One after another, distant systems awakened. The security commander whispered, "What's happening?" The machine answered, "Dormant human sanctuary network responding to confirmed Sentinel status." Across the galaxy, hidden stations powered on beneath frozen moons. Shipyards concealed inside asteroid belts illuminated for the first time in centuries. Massive orbital habitats emerged from camouflage fields wrapped around rogue planets. Encrypted transmitters that had remained silent for 300 years began broadcasting on forgotten frequencies. In one distant sanctuary, a woman with dark hair looked up from an ancient control console as warning lights transformed into welcoming blue. She read the message twice before speaking. The Sentinel. Tears filled her eyes. He's alive. Elsewhere, children stopped lessons as enormous observation windows opened to reveal fleets that had slept through generations. Pilots hurried toward waiting spacecraft. Engineers embraced one another. Elders quietly bowed their heads. Not in mourning, in gratitude. Back on Elysion, the Ark custodian projected a final message above the chamber. Human Continuity Network. Status update. The words changed. Population confirmed. A number began climbing. 1 million, 10 million, 100 million. It continued rising until it finally stopped. 4 fuels 862,000, 441,903. Cyril stared at the impossible figure. Her voice barely rose above a whisper. Elias. He couldn't answer. His eyes remained fixed on the number. For more than 3 centuries, he had believed he carried the memory of a dead civilization. Now he stood before proof that nearly 5 billion humans were still alive, and every one of them had just learned that the last Sentinel had finally come home. The number remained suspended above the Ark custodian. 4,862,000, 441,903. No one spoke. Not because words failed them, because no sentence could bridge the distance between believing an entire civilization had perished and discovering billions of lives had quietly endured beyond history's reach. Elias stared at the projection. His breathing slowed. For the first time in centuries, the weight pressing against his shoulders felt lighter. He had not failed. Humanity had survived. Cyril gently slipped her hand into his. You found them. His eyes never left the display. They found me. The Ark custodian answered with its steady synthetic voice. Correction. Mutual contact established. A tiny smile appeared on Elias's face. So they did. The celebration lasted exactly 12 seconds. Every display in the chamber flashed crimson. The Ark custodian's calm voice became noticeably sharper. Priority alert. Extragalactic activity detected. The golden star map vanished. In its place appeared a vast region of darkness beyond the galaxy's outer rim. Hundreds of dim lights flickered into existence. Then thousands. Then tens of thousands. Each represented an enormous vessel. The chamber grew silent again. The security commander swallowed. Those can't all be ships. The custodian responded immediately. Confirmed. One engineer whispered, "How large is that fleet?" The answer came without emotion. Estimated active combat vessels, 214,336. No one moved. Sorrel slowly looked toward Elias. This, her voice barely carried, this is what humanity disappeared from. He nodded once. Yes. Across the human continuity network, hidden command centers awakened in perfect synchronization. Inside an underground operations hall buried beneath a frozen mountain world, officers hurried to their stations as enormous holographic displays illuminated the room. A gray-haired woman wearing the insignia of a fleet marshal looked toward the central screen. The image of Elias appeared. She stood instantly. Every officer around her did the same. No order was necessary. For 3 centuries, they had trained for one possibility: the Sentinel's return. She activated a secure transmission. The Ark custodian accepted it immediately. A holographic figure appeared inside the chamber on Elysion. The woman looked at Elias for several long seconds. Then she smiled. "Commander Rowan." His expression softened. "Marshal, you've gotten older. So have you." She laughed quietly. "Only by paperwork." Several people in the chamber exchanged confused looks. Cyril stepped forward. "You know each other." The marshal inclined her head politely. "I know the man who volunteered to remain awake while the rest of us disappeared." She looked back at Elias. "I'd hoped we would meet again under better circumstances." "So had I." The marshal's expression became serious. "The Ark awakened early. I noticed. We've intercepted long-range probes." Elias folded his arms. "How long?" "They entered the outer halo 6 months ago. They found us." "We believe they followed dormant gravitational anomalies." The security commander interrupted cautiously. "Excuse me." Both humans looked toward him. "If these invaders have only now reached the galaxy, why activate the Ark today?" The marshal answered. "Because today they changed course. The projection shifted. Countless hostile ships altered formation. Their destination became unmistakable. Known space. They're accelerating." One engineer whispered. "Can we stop them?" Silence lingered. Finally, Elias answered. "We have to." Aboard Lord Varrix's flagship, the noble stood before his panoramic observation window as reports flooded the bridge. His intelligence officer approached cautiously. "My lord, what now?" The human signal spread farther than anticipated. "I assumed it would." The officer hesitated. "We've intercepted transmissions." "From where?" "Everywhere." He handed over the report. "Hidden human colonies." Varrix read in silence. Instead of anger, he smiled. "So the legends were true." "My lord, I never sought one human." He looked toward the stars. "I sought an entire civilization." The fleet commander frowned. "Do we continue the assault?" Varrix slowly shook his head. "No." The commander blinked. "We're withdrawing?" "We're adapting." His eyes narrowed thoughtfully. "The galaxy has changed." He closed the report. "And I refuse to be standing on the wrong side of history." Back on Elysion, the human marshal addressed the gathered officers. "Every sanctuary world is mobilizing." The star map expanded. Golden lights transformed into military symbols. Shipyards, defense platforms, medical stations, research facilities, entire fleets hidden for centuries emerged from concealment. Not for conquest, for survival. The security commander stared in amazement. "You built all this?" Quietly, the marshal replied. "We never stopped living." Cyril studied the formations. "They're remarkably disciplined." The marshal smiled. "We had 3 centuries to prepare." Elias finally asked the question weighing on everyone. "How long until contact?" The marshal's expression darkened. "At current speed." She enlarged the hostile fleet's projected path. 11 days. The room fell silent. 11 days. To unite civilizations that had distrusted one another for generations. 11 days. To prepare against an enemy that had erased entire galaxies. 11 days. To convince billions that humanity's return was not an invasion. It was a rescue. Later that evening, the estate had grown quieter. Military transports came and went without pause. Diplomats requested emergency audiences. Governments across known space demanded explanations. For the first time since the auction, Elias and Cyril found themselves alone. They stood on the same balcony where they had shared their first kiss. The ocean below reflected the fading sunlight. Sorel rested against the railing. The galaxy thinks humanity has returned to rule it. They're mistaken. I know. She looked toward him. But they don't. Elias joined her at the railing. My people hid because we believed protecting others mattered more than being remembered. And now? Now they'll have to trust strangers. She smiled gently. They'll have help. He looked at her. You've decided. I decided the day I bid at the auction. She laughed softly. I simply didn't realize what I was buying. You bought a great deal of paperwork. I bought a stubborn soldier. He smiled. You did. She reached up and adjusted the collar of his damaged combat vest. You know, what? The title everyone keeps using? Sentinel? It sounds lonely. It was. She leaned closer. It doesn't have to be anymore. He rested his forehead against hers. No, it doesn't. Their quiet moment ended as the Ark custodian projected one final message across every display in the estate. Emergency galactic assembly confirmed. Representatives from 143 civilizations arriving within 4 hours. The security commander entered with an unreadable expression. My lady. They're coming. Cyril nodded. I expected that. He looked toward Elias. They don't know whether humanity is their greatest hope. He paused before finishing. Or their greatest threat. Elias watched the stars beyond the balcony. They're about to find out. The Grand Assembly Chamber had been built to prevent wars. Its circular design placed every delegation at equal distance from the center, ensuring no empire, republic, or alliance could physically dominate another. Hundreds of banners hung beneath the vaulted ceiling, each representing a civilization that had survived long enough to earn a seat among the stars. Today, every seat was occupied. Military escorts lined the walls. Defense drones hovered silently above. No one trusted the unprecedented gathering. No one trusted humanity. Lady Cyril entered first, wearing the formal white and navy robes of House Valor. Her silver hair was gathered neatly behind her shoulders, her posture calm, despite the weight of countless eyes following her every step. Elias walked beside her. He wore no ceremonial uniform, only a dark formal jacket over simple clothing. The faded scar near his temple remained visible. He made no attempt to hide it. Whispers spread immediately. That's him. The human. The Sentinel. So ordinary. He doesn't look dangerous. Elias heard every word. He ignored them all. The Speaker of the Assembly struck a resonant chime. This emergency session will now begin. He looked directly at Elias. For 3 centuries, the galaxy mourned humanity. A pause. Today we discover that humanity chose silence. Several delegates nodded grimly. Others looked openly offended. The speaker continued. You will explain. Elias stepped into the center of the chamber. His voice remained calm. My people disappeared because we believed remaining visible would eventually endanger every younger civilization. A reptilian ambassador rose immediately. You expect us to believe that? I expect nothing. You deceived the entire galaxy. Yes. Another delegate stood. You abandoned your allies. We protected them. You vanished. We stayed close enough to intervene if necessary. Murmurs swept through the chamber. One elderly representative quietly asked, Did you ever intervene? Elias looked toward him. 7 times. Silence fell. We prevented extinction events. He didn't elaborate. He didn't seek recognition. The simplicity of the admission carried more weight than any speech. A projection appeared above the chamber. The Ark custodian had connected to the assembly network. Images replaced words. A dying star stabilized by unseen engineering. A plague halted before crossing planetary borders. An asteroid redirected away from an inhabited system. An evacuation completed hours before a supernova. Every intervention lacked witnesses. Every rescue remained anonymous. The final image showed human vessels disappearing into darkness before anyone could identify them. The speaker slowly lowered his head. You never asked for thanks. Elias answered quietly. No. A harsh voice interrupted. And yet you ask for trust. Lord Varix entered the chamber. Several guards instinctively reached for their weapons. He came alone, unarmed. The security commander narrowed his eyes. I wasn't informed he would attend. Sorel looked equally surprised. Varix approached the center until he stood opposite Elias. I owe this assembly honesty. The room grew tense. I orchestrated the auction. No one reacted. Many had already suspected it. I wanted the human found. The speaker frowned. For power? Varix slowly shook his head. For answers. He looked directly at Elias. I knew someone capable of surviving 3 centuries would never be an ordinary prisoner. You were correct. I also knew, he glanced around the chamber, that if humanity still existed, he exhaled slowly, the day would come when we desperately needed it. Several delegates exchanged uncertain glances. One finally asked, You've abandoned your own campaign? Varix answered without hesitation. Look outside. The assembly's enormous observation wall became transparent. Beyond it, the stars were changing. Tiny flashes appeared along the edge of known space. Thousands, then tens of thousands. The Ark Custodian immediately identified them. Hostile advance elements entering the galaxy. The estimated arrival time had changed. Not 11 days, less than 1. The Marshal's voice broke across every communications channel. Commander. Elias looked upward. They accelerated. I see that. They've abandoned reconnaissance. They know we're awake. The Marshal didn't soften the truth. They're coming for us now. Panic threatened to spread through the chamber. Delegates began speaking over one another. What do we do? Our fleets aren't ready. We need evacuation corridors. No. We need negotiations. There can be no negotiations. The speaker repeatedly struck the chime. Order refused to return. Then Elias spoke. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't shout. Yet every conversation stopped. They're afraid. Everyone looked toward him. Not of us. He pointed toward the stars. They're afraid humanity survived. Confused expressions spread across the room. A delegate asked, Why would they fear you? Because we learned. He enlarged the hostile fleet projection. They've spent thousands of years defeating civilizations one at a time. Another image appeared. Human fleet formations spread across hundreds of hidden systems. They've never faced a galaxy willing to stand together. The Marshal's hologram nodded. Human fleets are mobilized. Golden icons filled the map. One by one, alien military symbols joined them. House Valor, Imperial Defense, merchant coalitions, independent patrol groups, pirate squadrons, even governments that had spent generations at war slowly aligned into a single formation. The security commanders stared at the growing coalition. I never thought I'd see this. Cyril quietly smiled. Neither did they. Hours later, the combined fleet gathered beyond Elysion. The darkness between the stars glittered with engines preparing for battle. Human vessels finally emerged from concealment. Their designs differed from every known navy. Elegant, functional, purpose-built, not decorated. Not intimidating, simply efficient. Alien crews watched in respectful silence as thousands of human ships slid into formation without a single wasted maneuver. One young Imperial pilot whispered, They move like they're sharing one mind. An older captain smiled faintly. No, they've just practiced longer than the rest of us. Inside the flagship command center, Elias stood beside Cyril, overlooking the unified armada. She quietly slipped her hand into his. You know, what? You were sold as a slave? I remember. And now? She looked toward the countless ships awaiting his command. An entire galaxy is waiting for your next words. He smiled gently. They're not waiting for mine. She tilted her head. They're waiting for hope. Before he could answer, every tactical display flashed crimson. The hostile armada emerged from hyperspace. The stars disappeared behind an ocean of black warships, stretching farther than sensors could measure. The battle for the future of the galaxy had begun. The stars vanished. Not because night had fallen, because the invading armada filled the heavens. Black warships stretched across the edge of the system in endless ranks, blotting out constellations that had guided explorers for millennia. Their hulls reflected no light, and their formations shifted with unsettling precision. Across the Allied command network, silence settled. Not from fear, from disbelief. No civilization had ever witnessed a fleet of that size. The Ark Custodian projected one final estimate. Hostile vessels confirmed, 214,336. Friendly coalition, 38,912. The difference was impossible to ignore. The security commander exhaled slowly. We're outnumbered almost 6 to 1. Elias studied the enemy formation. They're expecting us to think that. Sarah looked toward him. You already have a plan. I have a beginning. Throughout the coalition fleet, every command screen activated simultaneously. For the first time in 3 centuries, a human sentinel addressed the galaxy. Elias appeared above thousands of bridges. He spoke calmly. We don't win this by matching their strength. Captains from 143 civilizations listened. They've spent thousands of years defeating isolated worlds. The enemy formation rotated into attack alignment. We won't give them isolated worlds. The tactical display expanded. Instead of a single battle line, Elias divided the coalition into hundreds of independent formations, connected by overlapping support routes. Every fleet could reinforce another within minutes. Every retreat created a new trap. Every sacrifice protected someone else. He looked into the camera. Protect the ship beside you. Someone else will protect yours. No dramatic speech followed. No promise of glory. Only a simple instruction. Yet every commander understood. Humanity's greatest strategy had never depended on invincible weapons. It depended on trust. The first exchange lit the darkness. Enemy beams crossed the void. Coalition shields shimmered. Human interceptors accelerated between larger vessels, drawing fire away from slower transports before disappearing again into overlapping defensive formations. Imperial cruisers covered pirate frigates. Merchant carriers evacuated civilian stations. Human destroyers repeatedly appeared wherever the fighting became most desperate. Not to dominate, to stabilize. The security commander watched in amazement. They're reinforcing everyone. A tactical officer nodded. They aren't protecting only human ships. Elias answered quietly. They never were. The invaders adapted quickly. A massive spearhead drove directly toward Elysion, hoping to destroy the Ark Custodian before the coalition could reorganize. Sorel saw it immediately. They're coming for us. Elias nodded. I know. Can we stop them? He looked toward the Marshal. Execute Horizon. The Marshal smiled. I was hoping you'd say that. Across dozens of hidden systems, dormant structures awakened. Not weapons. Gateways. Ancient transit arrays concealed for centuries unfolded into brilliant rings of blue light. Human fleets disappeared into one gateway and emerged instantly behind the invading armada. For the first time since entering the galaxy, the enemy formation broke. Not from damage, from surprise. The Marshal's voice filled every command channel. They've never encountered a distributed defense network. The security commander laughed despite himself. They've just been surrounded by the people they were chasing. The battle shifted. Instead of pressing forward, the invaders found attacks arriving from every direction. Coalition fleets rotated in and out of combat through the gateway network. Damaged vessels withdrew. Fresh ships replaced them. No formation fought alone for long. The enemy's numerical advantage became increasingly difficult to exploit. Hours passed. Then more. The Black Armada slowly lost momentum. Deep within the enemy flagship, their commander watched the tactical display. Analysis. A mechanical voice answered. Failure probability increasing. Reason. Target civilizations displaying cooperative behavior beyond predictive models. The commander studied the battlefield. They protect one another. Confirmed. He looked toward the projection of Elias. The human. A concentrated enemy strike finally reached the command sector. Explosions rocked House Valor's flagship. Warning lights flashed. One beam tore through the outer armor. The bridge shook violently. Sarah nearly lost her footing. Elias caught her before she fell. You all right? She nodded. I am now. Another explosion thundered through the ship. The security commander shouted, They've locked onto us. Elias looked at the tactical display. They're overcommitting. The commander blinked. What? They think removing me ends this. It doesn't? Elias smiled. No. He activated the fleet-wide channel. Every commander. Hundreds answered immediately. The plan continues. No one hesitated. No one waited for further orders. The coalition moved exactly as trained. The enemy flagship suddenly found itself isolated. Human cruisers emerged behind it. Imperial battleships closed its escape routes. Pirate squadrons disabled its engines. Merchant rescue vessels evacuated survivors from nearby battlefields even while fighting continued. Every civilization contributed, exactly as Elias had hoped. The enemy commander transmitted one final message. Human. Elias accepted the channel. You abandoned conquest. Yes. You abandoned empire. Yes. You chose sacrifice. Yes. The commander regarded him silently. That is why we misjudged your species. The transmission ended. Moments later, the remaining enemy fleet disengaged. One by one, the black warships turned away from the galaxy. The invasion was over. Not because humanity had destroyed them, because, for the first time, they had encountered a civilization that could not be divided. Weeks later, the Grand Assembly met once again. This time, there were no emergency alarms, no raised voices, only history. The speaker stood before every representative, effective immediately. He paused. The Imperial Charter abolishes slavery in every member system. Applause spread through the chamber. One government after another announced identical reforms. The auction houses closed. Ownership registries were erased. Chains disappeared from the law, not because humanity demanded it, because the galaxy had witnessed what happened when one person was treated as property. Outside the assembly hall, sunlight reflected across quiet gardens. Elias and Sorel walked slowly beneath flowering trees. The war had ended. The rebuilding had begun. Sorel smiled. So? You remember the auction? I try not to. I paid 40 million credits for you. You overpaid. She laughed. I disagree. He looked toward the peaceful skyline. I arrived believing I was the last man alive. And now? He turned toward her. Now I have a home. She slipped her hand into his. And? He smiled in a way she had never seen during the long months they had spent together. I have someone worth coming home to. She kissed him softly beneath the warm afternoon sun. Around them, children from dozens of different worlds played together, without caring which species had once ruled, feared, or misunderstood another. Above the gardens, human and alien ships crossed the sky side by side. The galaxy would remember many things about that extraordinary year. It would remember the hidden civilization, the impossible battle, the return of humanity. But history would smile most at one simple truth. The wealthiest people in the galaxy had gathered to purchase the last human as a helpless slave. Instead, they bought the wrong man.